the many faces of the reality that we now face. Welcome to Law and Society. Please subscribe and let's talk about this. And I wanted to have a general, sort of just, I don't know, completely unscripted sort of talk about what is happening in the country and around the world as we see, violence erupting everywhere. Just now, there was news that there's violence where in Vancouver, multiple people are dead because a truck ran through a crowded area. There's the violence in India and Pakistan. There's the cruelty that we see with the administration. And, at the end of the day, I asked myself, is what is happening societally productive or is it societally destructive? And it's very difficult in many parts of the world today to see something societally productive happening. We have the happiest countries in the world, like in Scandinavia, and they live in this socialist paradise. Even places like France and Germany, they have basic healthcare and education for free. And those things are societally productive. And yeah, it's baked into the taxes of the people who live there, and it is taxed, and you are taxed on it, and the government provides it. But there is a level of equality that doesn't exist in the United States. There is this disparity in wealth that causes some people to be buried in medical debt for the rest of their lives, some people having to pay a significant amount of their Social Security on prescription drugs, and some people who have the luxury, very few, 0.01%, who have the luxury of saying that their mother-in-law will not have will not get their Social Security check. I'm talking about Howard Lutnick here, not mother-in-law. So, we are at a place now in American society, we come to ask ourselves that what should we pay attention to? What is important to us? Is it important to us that we look at Abrego Garcia? Is it important to us that we look at how the government is rolling back EPA regulations? Is it important to us that Doji is going into our data systems and collecting all the data they can from of the American people? We have to look at all of those things and then some. We have to look at the fact that there is a serious attack on Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security. So how do I discern? I look at them as being, is what action is being taken, is it a distraction purely? Like Howard Lutnick saying something about his mother-in-law not having the money and not complaining from Social Security? Or is it something like in Abrego Garcia's case where the issue is much, much bigger than him? Where it is about due process of law and how the government, Donald Trump's reign and regime, is defying court orders, lower court orders, unless the order is spelled out and cannot be interpreted in any other way by the Supreme Court directly, as we saw in the ACLU-AARP case. The lower court orders, they're just not following. So that is an issue of due process for everybody. And we're seeing every single day that people are being illegally removed, American citizens. As I talked in the last episode, we haven't anything left. Everything from American citizens to undocumented immigrants to visa holders to green card holders, everybody is under threat. Nobody is safe. Is that a harm that we need to talk about? Yes, very much so. So we have to talk about, do we have to talk about the sabotage that Donald Trump's administration regime is doing on a daily basis to our infrastructure, to our defense apparatus, like having Pete Hegseth as the defense secretary, or undermining our position with our allies, or creating a trade war that ends up raising inflation and creating conditions that were nowhere to be seen when President Biden was in office. There was a zero chance of recession. Should remember that, because people like Donald Trump and J.D. Vance have been trying to peddle and blame Joe Biden for what's happening, but there was a 0% chance of a recession when Joe Biden and Kamala Harris were in power. We talk about the betrayal that Americans feel with the grocery prices, with not being able to bring grocery prices to a point, and he's lying about it. He's now openly lying about the fact that grocery prices are down, when that is simply not true if you look at the facts. You have his promise of ending the Ukraine conflict in 24 hours, and now he says he was just saying that figuratively. And now he understands that Putin doesn't want to end the war. Is it incompetence? Or is it ignorance? Whatever the case is, it is causing real harm on Ukrainian people and on America's role as the leader of the free world. You know, we saw images of Donald Trump sitting there with Zelensky during Pope Francis's funeral, and you could see that there are people who posted on social media saying, there's Donald Trump having a conversation with the leader of the free world, because that's what it seems today. Because Zelensky is fighting for the freedom of Ukraine, and Donald Trump would rather, his peace deal included Ukraine ceding territory. Why should they cede territory? Why? All these people have died for what? So we give up territory to Russia with no specific security guarantees? That's malice. That's not just ignorance and incompetence. His 24-hour thing that he's now saying 3 months later that was said figuratively, it's arrogance. He's never going to take responsibility for it. He's going to scapegoat to somebody else. He's going to say, yeah, Marco Rubio couldn't get it done. Yeah, Putin doesn't want to have peace. Yeah, Ukraine wasn't making it easy. None of it was part of the consideration when he said, I could just bring it peace in 24 hours. No. And you see that in how Donald Trump operates on a domestic level, where he does not care that people's medicine prices are going up again, since he rescinded Biden's policies on keeping prescription drugs to a limit for vulnerable groups. It's inhumane. Sowing the chaos of these tariffs Like he doesn't necessarily keep the tariffs. It's sort of ruling by consensus, like he'll throw out these absurd tariffs and the market will fluctuate and it'll give him opportunity for insider trading while he gauges what the public will be okay with, and then he brings them down. Then he pauses them. So the market goes up and people he wants make their money because he has been insider trading. And then he sort of goes on for a little while. Then he does something radical again. And the markets go up. And then he does something again and the markets sink down again. And this sort of volatility is definitely not good for the economy. It may be really good for the people who he's giving a heads up to. This transactional relationship that he has with the people who he is insider trading with, and they will just give money to his funds, Today we see this, and it comes up all the time, this manhood, and Professor Heather Cox Richardson calls it cowboy individualism. I just call it the existential crisis that American men have had for hundreds of years, and that politicians and people in power have exploited. It's less socioeconomic, and it's more socioeconomic at this point than it is racial. But this idea of, riling up young men and men on the basis of manhood, American manhood, it has its roots back in Victorian America, when after Emancipation Proclamation and after the 13th Amendment and the 14th Amendment, it was illegal, slavery was illegal, and so American men had to somehow adjust their psyche to think that they were above black men. So then came civility and savagery, and there's a whole history behind it. And that's what I studied when I was doing my independent study in undergrad. So it's been quite a while, but it left an impression on me. So there is an element of, manhood. There's this element of racism in our politics and our society today that is openly encouraged, that is openly talked about, that is openly platformed, and I just don't understand it, honestly. It's something that I will never understand, why it'll be, such a thing could be platformed. I said a while ago, that Donald Trump sells false hope. And today we're seeing that pay dividends in suffering. And as we will see in the coming months, it will continue to pinch down on Americans who can't afford medicine because he increases tariffs on pharmaceutical drugs, who can't afford basic groceries because they're not getting their Social Security checks. They can't get their basic medical health care because they don't have Medicaid and Medicare. Children with disabilities going without care, Medicaid going without special education and not being able to go to schools. This undermining of our constitutional order that is happening on a daily basis when Donald Trump defies laws via his executive orders, which, by the way, are not laws. And then you have him going around pressuring other departments to undermine the constitutional order, overreaching into the purview of the judiciary and the legislative branch by simply, without any judicial review, removing people, simply without any sort of procedure, removing people out of the country illegally, simply without any procedure, firing people who need to be notified of their firing, of their termination of employment based on law. So he is ruling by fiat with his executive orders that many of them are facially unconstitutional, like his birthright citizenship one, facially unconstitutional, like his election one. Those are going up to the Supreme Court. There's no doubt about it. And I hope that the Supreme Court comes to the right decision and realize that those are outside of the president's core authority to do anything about. Those are rights of American citizens under the 14th Amendment. Those are the rights of American citizens under our Constitution. So and then there's that 22nd Amendment nonsense that we hear all the time. That's just not going to work. You can throw out all of these things, these innuendos that you're going to going to run for 2028. No, you're not. No matter what argument you come around with, there is no reasonable argument in my mind that 22nd Amendment could anyway be abrogated, could anyway be sidetracked. So, despite the fact that I get so riled up about these conversations, is because I think it's important for Americans to know the truth, and I keep saying that over and over again. I also think it's important for us to know the information so we can process it and be able to bring the temperature down from the destructive, chaotic, ignorant, arrogant, incompetent administration that you could in one word say kakistocracy. We can come out and speak about how it is that rule of stupid people and the harm that it is doing. Let's not debate about distraction or harm and try to pick up one battle and not the others and pick our battles. You are going to have to face all of the battles, and you are going to have to win as many of those battles as you can. Now, I'll end with this. Brian Tyler Cohen reported online on Blue Sky that the government is now pushing for warrantless search of homes in search of undocumented American residents. That is a violation of the Fourth Amendment. I think that everybody who I personally think, and I'm being liberal with the Fourth Amendment, despite the fact that it's been neutered over the last 30, 40 years, that when you unreasonably seize people like Mahmoud Khalil, people like Ms. Oster, when you take people like Abrego Garcia and Andre Romero and Merwel Gutierrez and so many others, when you deport American citizens like the 2-year-old and the 10-year-old and other citizens out of the country without due process, you are violating not just the Fifth Amendment right, but you are unreasonably seizing them. You're violating the Fourth Amendment right. You're violating the right to counsel, because they don't get their right to counsel once they are illegally removed from the United States. It becomes more and more logistically difficult. So these are extrajudicial removals that are happening with malice, and you know that they're not happening in good faith, because you see judges like Judge Sinis say that the government, instead of listening to the Supreme Court's order, is in bad faith not complying with discovery and interrogatory questions. So the Supreme Court has to give a direct order. The Supreme Court has to safeguard whatever is left of our individual rights, because we are on that ledge. We barely have our Fourth Amendment right against unreasonable searches and seizures. And we are now at the point of losing our right to due process. It's not a distraction. It's a harm that'll impact every single American and every single American resident, every person's living in the United States. That's who American law applies to. And we are a nation governed by laws, not men. Donald Trump said, oh, there's some people involved, blah, blah, blah. Listen, the men are there to obey the laws. We are run by laws. Unless you understand that, you do not belong in the position that you're in, among several other reasons why you don't belong where you are. With that said, thank you so much for listening. Oh, when I was talking about the last thing, I was talking about Donald Trump. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, like, share, and I'll come back and talk to you soon.